Hi, I'm Dee.
I'm Jose.
And we're your token theater friends, people who love theater so much that we're filming this before the Labor Day weekend, and we're gonna be here Labor Day weekend because we're seeing Hercules in Central Park, so we can't leave.
Or whatever Hercules does.
I lift. I can lift you on my back,
I'll
like
be the
Hercules does to
muses.
Phil.
I'm Phil? Wow.
You're my mentor.
Anyway.
We're not talking about Hercules this episode. Who are we talking about?
Our guests today are Brandon Gill and Dimitri Moise of As Much As I Can, a new documentary, musical, theatrical experience coming to Joe's Pub on September 12th. So we talked to them about the show's themes and their careers and their origins, and it's a really good conversation, I think.
Yeah, they're very cute and tall, so let's go to the interview.
Yeah. We are here today with Brandon Gill and Dimitri Moise of As Much As I Can. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
What is As Much As I Can, and who do you play in the show?
Cool. Well, all right. Man, as much as I can. Well, I played Delius in the show.
I play George.
And As Much As I Can is a show that was compiled of different interviews between black men who recognize themselves as gay or bisexual, and who are also, some were positive, some were not. From Mississippi all the way up to Baltimore, Maryland, our writer interviewed them, and she put together their experiences and their conversations dealing with HIV, faith, intimacy, their families. And so the show kind of brings that to light, and it's roughly about 5 friends dealing with that. Couples dealing with breakups, intimacy, HIV, religion, and etc. And watching them and how they deal with that through life.
Heteronormativity, what it means to be a black man, a black person.
Toxic masculinity, all of these themes that the play touches upon.
As a queer man of color, I feel that theater has let me down and not represented me my entire life. Like, the biggest representations we have specifically of gay cis men are all white dudes, the boys in the band. Angels in America, where Belize is basically like an afterthought, right? It's just there to take care of all the people, all the white guys who are sick. And we have this idea of AIDS and HIV being related to white gay men. And that's it. Like Tom Hanks in Philadelphia and
Charlie Sheen.
Yeah. And so what's it like for you to be in a show that's like, wait a second, like this is actually inaccurate, because in fact, as the more progress there is in like HIV drugs and HIV research, it's still people of color, particularly black men, who are being ignored and who are being like put to the side because all the white gays are healthy.
Yeah, well, I think, as we know, the CDC has shown us that acquiring of HIV among black queer men has been on the rise since 2015. Which is a new trend. It's not a good one. We've seen our white counterparts have a decrease in the acquiring of HIV because of their level of access to PrEP. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like 1 in 10 people is a person of color who can acquire PrEP in America, something like that. And the other 9 are their white counterparts. And so that's a difficult thing. Like, how do we create levels of access for people who are marginalized or people of color who are privileged? I remember when I was diagnosed, my life halted, and thankfully I grew up very privileged, so I had all of these levels of access where I could just call the right people and get linked to care in a week. But that doesn't happen for everyone, and you're right, HIV has been a total whitewashed story. And you even look all the way back to the beginning of it, right, in the United States, and Patient Zero is who we all focus on, right? But what we forget is that Robert Rayford was actually the first person, and we've featured it in Plus Magazine, a 15-year-old boy of color who acquired the virus long before anyone knew what it was and passed away. And then later on is when people realized, oh, it was this kid Robert, this little black boy, who was actually the first person in America to have this virus. And yet we don't focus on him. How do we bring that narrative back to that? Because now it's been this whitewashed over generations, right? Decades.
Right.
How do we change that narrative?
And I think that's also the purpose of the show, is to educate. is to educate the audiences on HIV and on its stages and on who can be affected by it and how it affects a community and how it can affect a group of people, and how there's a disparity again between the people who have access to healthcare and to PrEP, and just the knowledge of acceptance and how to deal with it emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. So I think the show touches upon all of that. It's to level the playing ground a little bit, and so to let everyone know that they're not other.
And that it's okay to talk about these issues, because as people of color, especially Black men, the last thing that we want to talk about, or this is a generalization, but mental health is something that we don't discuss in our communities. Vulnerability, toxic masculinity, like we don't talk about these things in our community. And so this show is going to be so important because it's immersive. So it's going to put it in this audience's face, but not in a way that, like, I don't believe the show's preachy. I don't
it doesn't feel preachy at all. It feels like, again, like an educational
we're in this
tool.
Together. Yeah.
And making it immersive, again, it creates a completely chemical response in one's body when you're watching an experience as opposed to then when you have an experience. And you will have an experience with us because we can take lines to you. We can touch you. We were there physically.
Something that I always tell clinicians or anyone that I go talk to is it's so important that empathy is in the room, because that's what I lacked when I was diagnosed. It was just like, you're HIV positive, you need to get linked to care, you're gonna die if you don't. Like, that's basically what it was, you know what I mean? And thankfully I had the wherewithal and the knowledge behind how to get care. It didn't scare me, it scared me like to death, literally. But I knew who to call. Imagine if you're someone who doesn't know like what the next step is going to be.
Dimitri, you talked about it, about being positive, and so have you been, with this show, have you been able to put in a bit of your own lived experience or help to inform the character that you're playing?
Oh yeah. It hits me very close to my heart. Like, I was even talking to our lead producer just the other day, and I was like, so I finally am opening the script and like looking at the lines because now I'm not crying. It's like real. So I'm very excited to bring all of the components of who I am to this, and it's the first project that I'm working on where I'm getting to do that, which I'm very. It's like a weird dark blessing, you know. Like, I would have never expected. I was diagnosed a year ago, so I'm newly diagnosed, and when I made the decision to come out, I did make that decision to be a newly diagnosed person because people are getting diagnosed every day, and it's important to see young people because we are the ones being affected, but I'm thriving. I just got my test results from my doctor yesterday. He's like, you still look great, everything's awesome, like, great, you know? And it's like a simple email, you know, that is letting me know that my viral load is under 25 copies, I'm undetectable, it's awesome, you know? I've had these experiences where I travel the country and I don't have access to medication. I was in Albuquerque, I was in Albuquerque and the whole state, they didn't have HIV medication.
What do you mean the whole, what?
They didn't have any meds, and I'm waiting the whole week for meds. I'm on tour with another show. We're leaving on Monday, and it's that morning, and they were supposed to have the medicine in, but then I go on the Monday, and they're like, oh, we didn't even order it. And I'm like, I'm flying in 2 hours, and I'm out of medicine literally today, and I'm going to Texas. So what up? And I had to drive around and finally go to this one hospital that had literally 30 pills. And there are people who are in Albuquerque who are living with HIV. So, what up?
You were in Holler, if you hear me.
Yes.
And I wonder, you know, because as much as I can, also, besides obviously touching on very important issues, it's a show that has a cast comprised completely of people of color.
Yes.
And, you know, like, you had that experience in Holler already. I don't know if you've had that experience before working with only people of color. And
It's an extremely completely different thing, and you don't necessarily sometimes think about it until you're in the room. Then you get in the room and you're like, oh my goodness, most of these people are Black or people of color in this artistic world. And it is rare. I've been lucky enough most of the shows that I've done have been centered around the Black experience. So I did Holler From Here meeting, which is about, of course, Tupac and his music, and then I did Bella at Playwrights Horizon, which is about a big butt young black girl, and then did Stagger Lee, which these shows that focus on the black experience. And every time you step into that room and you're creating with an individual who speaks the same language culturally and artistically, it's a freedom that you don't feel every day as an artist of color.
Can you tell us about your artistic origin story? Like, how and why did you decide to pursue performing as a profession?
Well, I went down a really interesting route. So my parents. My dad is a nuclear medical technician in cardiology, so he does a lot of radioactive medicine stuff. And my mom it's like really complicated. And my mom works at the United Nations. So for them, they were like, you're gonna be a doctor. And I was like, okay. But I fell into theater in high school. I fell in love with it. So I had these two routes that I was gonna take, either go for medicine or theater. And I applied to 20 schools. Half were theater, half were for medicine. I got into most of them. But I was at this crossroads where I was like, do I really wanna go down this route and go into residency and be a doctor, or I'm in love with this thing that I found out I can make a living out of, and I decided to do theater instead. And I minored in some psych stuff at school, but going to NYU is where I went, and it was such an amazing program, and it propelled me right into my first show, which was Book of Mormon on Broadway. And I kind of haven't really stopped since then, and I feel like it's been the universe, God, telling me this was the right decision and this was the right path for you to take.
I stumbled into it in a way. So my biggest influences were my mother and my grandmother. So my mother, she was in a singing group for a long while I was a kid. So I remember sitting in the studio watching her and her group called Trichet. Watching Trichet, right?
What kind of music?
They were R&B, soul.
Are they on YouTube?
Maybe. No. So just watching.
If we find it, we'll link it.
Right, exactly. It's oh my gosh. So watching her record in the studio, watching them rehearse, and then my grandmother, she was a dancer, and so my grandmother is really the one who exposed me to Manhattan, and they would buy me tons of sing along videos and tapes. So when I was 5, I told my mother I wanted to be inside the television. She was like, oh, okay, cool. At 11, with all the wherewithal that she knew, she put me in a musical theater class. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll do this acting and dancing thing that goes along with this singing thing that I'm really trying to do. So at the end of that program, when I was 11, there were agents and managers in the office, in the audience. And the manager walked to my parents, and she was like, hey, I really enjoy your kid. I want to sign him. And I was like, okay, cool. So at 11, I started working professionally. But again, me still wanting to be a singer, but I started doing this acting thing that people were telling me I should do. And I was like, okay, cool. But it wasn't really until 8th grade, 9th grade when I auditioned for LaGuardia High School. So I was like, oh, this acting thing is for me.
I mean, you got your first part in Law & Order when you were still at Juilliard.
I did. Oh, yeah, that did. So, Juilliard did not allow us to work at all or to audition. So it was very tricky how I got to do that. But it was also, I felt like it was for me. It was supposed to be for me. My agent, my manager, she called me. She was like, hey, we have an audition for Law & Order. I was maybe on a Tuesday. And I was like, okay. I was checking my schedule. I was I can't make it. 2 weeks passed. And she called again. She was like, hey, they still have not found that kid that they're looking for, and they still want to see you.
Awesome.
I was like, okay, I'll go in. Boom, boom, boom. Met with Jonathan Strauss and the producer team. And I'm walking out. He whispers in my ear. He's like, you better get your sick days ready. I was like, oh, no.
That's awesome.
And so figured it out. Was able to I got excused 2 days from Juilliard for other reasons, and went, shot it, and it was awesome.
Yeah, no one ever found out, right?
Right, exactly.
NYU is the same way.
First time on television, and that was great.
You both knew that you wanted to do this since before you were adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in the years that have passed since you first started to where you are now, have you seen, when you were little, for instance, were there parts that you maybe dreamed of playing at some point where you were these are parts for white dudes? And now are we at that place where you comfortably could go into a casting? No? Mm-hmm. How do we fix that?
Don't put Tammy Blanchard, Jonathan Groff, and Christian Borle in Little Shop of Horrors, because I've already seen it and it's great and we love the three of them, but
MJ Rodriguez should be doing it here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why should
and
do it in
that's
California?
no tea, no shade.
Yeah.
It's no tea, no shade. But I've seen Jonathan, like we've seen Christian, we've seen Tammy, we love them.
Yeah.
But like, yet again, here we are. It frustrates me that the only woman of color who was Jenna was Nicolette Robinson because she's Leslie Odom's wife. That maybe not be it, but who else of color has played Jenna?
No one.
You know, and it just frustrates me to see these incredible roles not tackled by people of color or trans people or propping up a person because of their identity and pretending that that's diversity on Broadway. That's not diversity, in my opinion. It's not diverse to say, look at our trans person of color as the lead. What's diverse to me is look at all of the people that we populated on stage of all walks of life who are talented as fuck, and we don't have to actually qualify who they are. They're just good, and we can hire them.
Right.
Oh, and they happen to be trans.
The stage
That's
is supposed to be a
diverse to me.
representation of the world. Stage is supposed to be a representation of life.
Rachel Chafkin is diverse to me. What she does, I think, is at the forefront of an incredible wave of where I hope theater continues moving. I don't see other people like Rachel doing it.
What's actually interesting to me is working with people of color, even black men, on the other side of the table. It's been very few, even women of color that I've worked with, like Patricia McGregor, maybe Kenny Leon, Kent Gash. But the fact that I could just throw them out only on one hand.
Yeah.
My experiences.
Clever
PSM.
O'Hara, yeah.
Cody Reynard.
Yes.
Who else is a black PSM that we could spit out right now?
Belinda. I know I don't know her last name, but like, you know,
See?
there's so many. That's the problem. That's the problem. But even thinking in the terms of black and white and roles meant for people of color, roles not meant for me, I didn't honestly get that mentality or even quote unquote become woke until I reached Juilliard. Because it's a larger institution, there was much less of us.
Same
Like
for
there were
NYU.
5 in my class out of 19, but there was only 800 students in the school, so I think black students, there were only 40 of us total. And so if you didn't know each other's name, you at least knew each other's faces. And so then that started the wheels turning. And then in terms of, it's a classical conservatory, so yes, we worked a lot on Shakespeare, a lot of classical text, but the wheels turning of like, where do I fit into this? And like, what role is actually for me? I know I can do it, but was it written for me? Is it written for my culture? Like, or do these words fit in my mouth the way August Wilson's do?
NYU is the same way, and I remember, so I grew up in predominantly white spaces. My whole life, I went to Catholic school, private school here in New York, and we had our orientation for NYU when I was a freshman, and every head of every department was a person of color. Ken Gash, head of our program, Donnie Lynn Fraser, head of speech, Michael McElroy, head of vocal performance, Byron Easley, head of dance, and to see
amazing.
all these people of color, I was like, I had never seen that before, to see people of color in those positions of power like that. And it gagged me. I was like, what? And then there were only 3 black boys in the whole, me, Jelani Aladdin, and Taylor Daniels, who's in Hamilton now. Kazai Nyambi, who's in Book of Mormon, and it was like, and Ari Stachel, who Dance Visit. It was like us. That's it. We were a tight pod, and we all were really close, but we were such a tight pod because Kent, I think, saw something in the 5-6 of us, Tatiana Wexler, you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm dropping it anyway. But there was a very small pod of us, and it was similar, they would specifically pick things for us to work on because they knew certain things wouldn't sound in our mouths the way August Wilson did.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? Or anyone else, you know what I mean? I remember even doing Eurydice, Sarah Rule, and even that, well, we did, by the way, Meet Vera Stark.
Yeah.
And that was another one. Oh my God, she's incredible. And just to have people of color in these positions of power seeing the fact that they needed to work with us because our community isn't representative of the way that we're talking about it right now.
It goes back to acknowledgement. Just happy to be seen. Happy to be seen, acknowledge that I need something different. Or let's go about it this way for you.
And it doesn't mean that because I get into conversations often with people who are white, and it doesn't mean that it is any less than, or we need more than, or it goes back to level of access, acknowledgement, and just being equal, and allowing me to walk into a room and maybe my color doesn't have to be first. Maybe just who I am can be first in the room and not look at this black boy who can sing, you know? And that's how I felt on every project that I've worked on. And I'm grateful for it all. But this is the first project where I get to be like, oh, we are ourselves. And like, we get to do this and bring who we are into this, you know?
You walk into a room and you see people like you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You walk into a room and you see people like you. It's surprising and amazing how just that little thing, what that can do to the mentality of your workday, of how much effort you put forth, even how inspiring it can be, just to walk into the workplace and see people like you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No, not having a code switch. It's like,
Yes.
it's one more thing you don't have to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've given up code switching now. I don't do it no more. I'm like so tired of it. I had to do it my whole life. And I remember even growing up, my parents are from Haiti. They have like thick French accents, but I don't hear them anymore. And I remember growing up, people would always say like, oh, your son is so articulate. Or like, wow, you speak so well. You know what, like, I'm taking classes with like all your kids, like, and I was born in America. So like, I don't understand like,
Why are you so surprised?
Why am I the articulate one? You know, or like, oh, like, I didn't expect your parents to have like such an or like, making little microaggressive comments to the way my parents speak, or, you know what I mean? Or like, yeah. And it's so important to be able to walk into a space where like, we don't have to code switch or pretend to be something that we're not in order to please a certain person, or to be palatable or digestible to a group of people. You know?
When you're with people who look like you, they understand how much you encompass, how versatile you can be, as opposed to sometimes I can have a conversation with a white individual like, oh, you've been on Law and Order, did you play one of the criminals? Or like, I'm like, actually I didn't. I actually played a student who was on his way to Cornell and got his scholarship taken away because a white girl accused me of raping her. I didn't. That's actually why I was on Law and Order. You know, no, I didn't play a gun-wielding criminal thug. And like, that's actually what I've never done on television.
And again, no tea, no shade, but that's the stereotype that has been implanted.
Right.
You're first generation American. I'm from Honduras, so I'm technically not American, I guess, except that I live in America. But you know, we are from our culture is from countries that are, to say the least, not the current president's favorite. And he'll usually say a lot of things about the places where our families come from and where we come from that are not very nice. And I wonder for you, because I know it's been happening to me recently, where I just want to be Honduran as fuck.
Me too.
Everywhere I go.
Oh, you should look at my Instagram story from last night. It was Haitian as hell, okay? My cousin got married, and it's just so funny. I literally put a thing on my Instagram story, and the caption, because we were at this like Fears, and my family's like, we're Fears. So like, we were at this Fears, like Jericho, whatever. So I put a caption on my Instagram story with like where we were at, and the caption was, poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, my little Haitian ass, okay? Because our family throws down. And I remember there was a day in 6th grade, we learned about Haiti, and the very first thing we learned was Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And I remember thinking, oh wow, like I have such pride. French is my first language, like we're so proud of where we come from. I was so confused. And I'm a total history buff, so that afternoon I got every book I could find in the library. I went home and I was like, Mom, we learned today that Haiti was the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. My mom literally started like bawling because she was just like, I can't believe that's how they're teaching you about our country. She's like, Haiti is so beautiful and America ruined it. And she's like, that's the reason why we left.
That's a theme for a lot of countries.
I'm screaming.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, and she was like, I can't believe that's what you're learning, because my mother has such pride in where she comes from. And she left for some really, really terrible, terrible reasons, she and my grandmother, and that's why they've never left each other's side. And now, fast forward to 45 and whatever he's doing, and calling us shitholes and calling us this and that, when in reality, you know, the colonizers are the ones who actually made it the shithole, and it's pretty beautiful if you spent the time to go, you know. So yeah, I do like to be Haitian as fuck, And on top of that, I love to be black as fuck now.
Mm.
And I've realized now that like being black doesn't mean I have to be a certain thing or like la da da da. Like, you know what I mean?
Because
It's
that's
like,
not your image of black. That's you know what being black is. That is not what someone told you. Black
That's
is that
what I
is
thought
someone
my whole
showing
life was
you.
what
Black
being
is that
black
somebody
was.
else. That's the majority's interpretation of who you are because they don't know enough of the minority.
Well, I was always too white for my black friends or too gay for my black friends, and I was always the black friend to my white friends. So it was like, where do I fit in? You know?
And see, and that mentality, that's just mentality that's been passed down. They actually, your friends didn't know any better when they're like,
No, yeah.
Same thing happened to me, like, oh, you're an Oreo or you're white. And I'm like, no, I'm just smart and articulate and like grew up in a certain area and yada yada. That's what that means. But what you're calling me, what you don't understand is that you calling me white is that you're saying all of my good attributes have to be contributed to another race.
Yeah.
Like it can't be just you. Like, oh, you got curly hair, you must be mixed. Nah, I'm actually not mixed.
Come
Like,
on
you
now.
know,
Come on now.
things like that, or
Okay.
whatever. Like, no, you're taking my positive attributes and you're giving it the
someone
credit
else.
to someone else. I'm like, no, it's my it's my culture, it's my heritage, it's my people. That's where it comes from.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, a final question for you is, what role in the musical theater canon would you play if you could pick?
Bobby and Company.
Yes.
I played Bobby junior year, and it was like transformative for me as a junior, being like 20 years old. Like, so I can only imagine now having lived the life that I've lived, and even heading to 35 years old, like what I could do for that role and bring to that role. You know, I would love to play Bobby.
Can I play Joanne in your company?
Can you do it in drag?
I mean, duh.
Great. You heard it.
He
You
can't
heard it.
sing, but but you
That's
know,
okay.
effort,
Everybody,
you know?
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Elaine, no offense, but she'll be in heaven.
God bless.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
I will
love
say
Elaine.
We can't have the queens coming after us.
No. Elaine has everything.
That's funny. The first thing that came to mind was Sweeney Todd.
Oh, we both love Sondheim. That's great.
Yes.
We love
Sweeney
Sondheim.
Todd.
We love Sondheim. Oh my god.
I love playing the human condition. So, what's going on with him mentally, and like what's his intention, and the darkness, and the flip side. It's almost like Jekyll and Hyde. Very like that's meaty stuff. And Sondheim, he does not write for the untrained. You know, you actually cannot if you don't know, if you have not trained in your craft in some way. It's almost another language to you in terms
It's
of
like
the beats
Shakespeare.
and the understanding and like what he's saying with these notes and why does it go minor here and like what like he
Why did this
gives
interval jump here?
He gives you all of that information right in the music.
I think you'd be a good Anthony right now because you're still very young. And then in 10, 15 years, you can
Thank
do
you.
Sweeney.
Let's go. Let's do
Such a
it
good
all.
Anthony.
Let's do it all.
Would you like to invite our viewers and our listeners to come see As Much As I Can?
Absolutely.
Okay, so As Much As I Can is playing at Joe's Pub September 12th through September 16th.
Yes, we have 2 shows every evening. I believe
Wow.
one is at 7, the other is at 9:30.
You can get
Something
tickets
like that.
online. You can Google As Much As I Can, Public Theater, Joe's Pub, and it'll come right up.
And we will be there. Come support us.
Yeah.
You might get touched by them.
You will be touched.
You will
by
be
us.
touched. Done.
With your consent.
Come see the show and you will be touched.
Thank you both.
Yes,
Thank
thank you for
you so
having us.
much.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Which musical theater role would you play if you could?
All of them.
Wow, Bernadette.
All of them. No, I think these days I would want to be Evita. So I just want to go outside and like.
I'm Brand, and wear the white gown.
Yeah, like I said in the interview, I'm feeling especially Latino these days, and there are such few Latinx characters in
It's
the musical
true.
theater canon that Evita is one of the most famous ones, and I'm gonna play Evita even if it's the last thing I do on this earth. What about you?
I could be Che. Anyway. No. Well, I've always wanted to be Christine in Phantom, but I think as I get old, I want to be the Phantom. So.
Do it.
Anyway, thank you for watching. Come here for theater advice and fashion tips. We have all the shirts here. If you like our videos, please click the like button and subscribe. And feel free to let us know who you think we should interview because the fall season's kicking up and We have so many names, and we can't choose. Help. All right. Anything you want to say to the people? But okay, and remember, especially on Labor Day weekend, theater's more fun when you take a friend. Bye.